Alright guys, welcome back to Formula 1 news. Serious drama emerging at McLaren. Yes, they're the World Constructors Champions for the second year on the bounce, but an ongoing lawsuit between McLaren and IndyCar champion Alex Palou has thrown all sorts of drama out into the open. Not just questionable business practices from the McLaren side, but also where Zak Brown's true loyalties really lie, and whether that's had any impact on what we have seen in the championship battle so far this season between their two drivers. This is getting pretty spicy indeed, and the PR damage control they're trying to do doesn't seem to be working in the eyes of many fans. Very much enjoyed your thoughts in the comments. Hit the like button if you enjoy. Subscribe if you're new as always. This is one of many videos they've put out over the last few days, and we will discuss this in more detail in due course because there's a lot to say on McLaren today and the way that they're going about things lately. The fact that it's Oscar carrying this case is also, I think, rather orchestrated. But a few things to discuss before we get there. Isaac Hadjar, we don't know when it's going to be confirmed, but it seems very likely now he will get the promotion to Red Bull Racing. He's just done too well for them kind of not to, and Tsunoda's not done anywhere near enough for them to guarantee it. We do believe that the decision will be made after Mexico, so this has been rumoured for some time, and it's now further understood that is still likely to be the case. So effectively, Yuki will probably have to win in Austin or Mexico if he wants to do enough to keep his seat. But yeah, we'll see. Probably 2 more rounds, and then they might start to actually confirm some things, Red Bull, or they might wait a little while longer. Now, before we get to McLaren, they're great rivals for a long time. Ferrari, they nearly won the Constructors last year, not even close this year. They've built an absolute dog of a car. Now, what they've also done is collapse their stock price. Now, it's not necessarily they don't make the decisions, but the numbers don't look good. Now, this is not relative to their F1 performance, right? It's a much bigger deal than that, but they had this big investor day yesterday, and we talked about that they were doing this big investor day. Vigna was going to be there, Alcan was going to be there. They were going to talk a bit about trying to win again in Formula 1 and all this. And we talk a fair bit about how Ferrari as a bureaucracy and the politics and how it's kind of attached to the Formula 1 program, and it's kind of not really, and maybe they don't have enough separation as they should. Loads of other issues that we know are inherent with Ferrari. Their stock price has gone down. As I say, it's not because their F1 team is struggling. There's a lot more to it than that. I think they were initially targeting in the coming years 40% of their sales to be full electric vehicles. They've now revised that down to 20% just because of general market conditions. Lots of manufacturers are concerned as to whether EVs are really the future of the automotive industry as maybe many thought they were several years ago. You know, I still think there will be in the cars of the future an electrical component, but it's unlikely to be as invasive, at least in the eyes of the manufacturers. Currently, European regulations have a lot to do with this stuff as well. But yeah, Ferrari are under that situation. Their numbers just weren't that good in terms of sales. Some of their recent products haven't really hit the desired markets in the way that they might have expected. It's still Ferrari, but the investors weren't very happy about it. So that was a big announcement yesterday that came through, a pretty big single day drop since the stock trading opened actually a decade ago. So pretty big deal. But the other big deal is about what they're going to do on the Formula 1 side, right? And there have been loads of questions about this. Fred Vasseur got his contract extended about 5 rounds ago, and since then, they are well on their way to a full collapse Ferrari in terms of the Constructors' Championship. They, on current evidence, look like they're probably going to finish 4th. Red Bull may overtake them in the coming rounds, and it doesn't look like they've got much left in the tank to overtake Mercedes, especially with their seeming recent progress, given what happened in Singapore. And that's where, once again, questions around this man have started to arrive. I mean, it's a pretty spectacular Photoshop job here, but we see Christian Horner in a Ferrari uniform, as it were, and, well, who knows what's going to happen here. But the point is, we know that Horner wants to get back into F1. We know that he can get back into F1 as soon as, we think, April, May, June next year. We're not 100% sure. Something around then. We believe that he actually took less of a payout from Red Bull in order that he could work earlier. I saw that discussed, that he could have even had more money from Red Bull with their negotiating on the exit of his contract, and he could have rode off into the sunset. But he literally was like, look, I want to come back as quick as possible, so you will effectively give me less money. Difference between 100 million and 150, I don't know what the numbers would have been. It's not really relevant at that point, but his intention is to come back as quick as he possibly can, and we believe that will be the case relatively early next season. It's a possibility. Now, we also know that if Horner does come back, or whenever he comes back, wherever he goes, he will want to have some level of control, right? This is the Horner way. Maybe it's what Ferrari needs. Whether you think Horner would be a right fit for Ferrari, I don't know if Horner believes that Ferrari would be the right fit for him. But, hypothetically, if Horner came into Ferrari and they did give him all the power and all the control that he desired, I think it would be good for Ferrari fundamentally. I think it would alleviate many of the issues that Ferrari have struggled with over the last few years. Would they ever do that? They certainly wouldn't be giving Horner any ownership, I don't imagine, of the team, any equity. Other teams may be willing to do so, but Aston Martin may have said no to Horner. That was a rumour as of yesterday. We don't really know. The point is that all of a sudden, this rumour is back on the table, and this rumour comes and goes quite often, but Ralph back at F1 Insider said the following, because John Elkann is not very happy. They weren't happy with Vasseur anyway, but they arrived to that Grand Prix and they did a bit better, and Elkann and Vigna, they spoke to Hamilton, they spoke to Leclerc, they spoke to the team, and those guys said, look, we think Vasseur's the man for the job. The struggles we've had are not his fault. We've got to ride it out, right? And I think that logic is fair, to be honest. But is Vasseur going to change things enough at Ferrari to really lead them back to success? It doesn't currently feel like it. And Bark says the following. Horner has 14 world titles on his resume. Elkann is a very emotional guy who isn't interested in what he thought yesterday, but rather what he thinks today. So, despite that they've extended Vasseur's contract, it seems his position is already wobbling, and they're apparently unaware that they're closing the door for Verstappen in that front, which is kind of interesting analysis that it seems that Verstappen and Horner probably not going to team up again at some point, right? Max may be okay with it, but Jos Verstappen certainly wouldn't be. But the Horner theory all of a sudden is now bubbling up again. Vasseur is shaky, Leclerc's looking at other options, and, for Ferrari, if they lose Leclerc, it's such a damning indictment of where they are. That, well, as he says, things remain exciting at the Scuderia. Exciting depending on your perspective. From an outsider's perspective, yeah, exciting. If you're a Ferrari fan, well, I don't know, maybe you feel like the way that things currently are going just isn't going to work. But all of a sudden, the rumours about Horner are continuing about this potential thing. And look, it's not like if this happens, it's going to happen soon. But, within 6 to 7 months, this could be a possibility, especially if the new regulations do not go to plan for Ferrari. So we might end up discussing that again over the coming days. Vigna, Elkann, they keep talking about we need to win, we have to win, it's a personal goal, we need to do it for the fans or whatever. It's like, all right, well, what is the action that you are going to take? But let's do McLaren, because this has been a big story, and I was going to talk about it a bit yesterday, but I just thought that there would be more drama on this, and there was today, so we're going to get into it all. Now, McLaren have won the Constructors, congratulations. They do this post-celebrations at the McLaren Technology Centre with the whole team. And here's the whole team in the papaya, as you guys can very clearly see. Loads of likes and, well, anyway, some very interesting replies. But what I will say is if you go to the Instagram page, there has been a lot of, I would say, damage control from the PR team over the last few days, right? Like, for example, this post was a great example. We saw the one they did on their Twitter page. But we know that the McLaren fans and the Oscar fans are not very happy about what happened in Singapore. And if I'm Oscar, I'm not happy about it. If I'm Mark Webber, I'm not happy about it, right? And understandably so. But the team wants to say, oh no, we're still together, everyone's still very much on board, even though rumour has it that Piastri is going to throw these damn papaya rules out the window when we get to Austin, and it's every man for himself. Now, McLaren will still say, oh no, we're very committed as a team, we're going to keep going the way we are before, the relationships between all our drivers is absolutely fantastic. But of course we know that's not like the case, especially with this drama with the Alex Palou lawsuit we'll get to in a second. But, this is just one example, right? Damage control button, like opening the comment section with a bag of popcorn. And like, this is only one post. If you go through all the posts over the last few days, world champions, you'll see something similar. Where's the photos of Oscar up on the podium with the team? Justice for Oscar, right? Plenty of this going on. And, you'll see another one here, hanging in the Louvre, Justice for Oscar, OP81, Justice for Oscar, right? Like, this is all their Instagram is right now. And they can't, delete it, because Oscar is their driver, and he is their world championship leader as it stands. So, there's all sorts, you guys, I don't even read the comments, but I'm just looking through a handful of posts here, and this is all you see. You fast forward to today, they're, getting the team together, thank Oscar for the title, right? And then they did that video that I just mentioned, which is right here, And, it's Oscar walking with Andrea Stella, right? Oscar doing the heavy lifting as always. So, it's all going on right now. And we know that things are getting pretty spicy outside of just McLaren from the fan perspective. And I think McLaren are trying to help them deal with it, right? But I mean, look at this, damage control. I think everyone can kind of see what they're doing here. And a lot of Oscar Piastri fans aren't very happy about it, right? We've got comments like this, come back to me, which is what happened back in the Dutch Grand Prix. But the reason why this gets very spicy for me is what's been happening in court in the last couple of days. So, Alex Palou, if you're unfamiliar, the dominant driver of IndyCar, multiple champion over the last few seasons. Now, he was connected with McLaren. He actually, I think, did a test, didn't he, or did a pre-practice session in Austin a couple of years ago. He's been with McLaren for some time, kind of, but he hasn't been racing for them in IndyCar. He's been racing for Chip Ganassi. But it looked like for a time that was going to change. So, great article here for Motorsport, kind of running down what's been happening, where this is all coming from. But effectively in 2022, Chip Ganassi and McLaren announced competing claims over Palou's services. After several months of negotiation, the parties reached an agreement that allowed Palou to remain with Chip Ganassi for 2023, while also serving as test and development driver for McLaren's Formula 1 team. Under the arrangement, he would then leave CGR to join McLaren's IndyCar operation in 2024, giving both sides a compromise. However, Palou eventually decided to remain at Chip Ganassi in 2024, claiming because the whole reason why McLaren were interested in getting him onto their IndyCar team was that they were promising him at least a chance of a Formula 1 seat. But Palou believed that actually that was all smoke and mirrors, right? So this has hit the UK High Court and lots of drama. In a witness statement, he claims that Zak Brown, so this is all about Zak Brown really, this isn't Andrea Stella, it is about another Andrea, a different Andrea, that we'll get to in a second. But Brown had given him hope that an F1 seat might become available. When testing with McLaren, Zak told me he believed that we could make it happen and that he would give me all the preparation I needed to get to F1. At the time, I thought he was genuine. Now, this is the part of the article that has really got a lot of Oscar Piastri fans' heads turning, because he says this: I went for dinner with Zak near the McLaren Technology Centre. Zak told me it was not his decision to hire Oscar Piastri. He said it was the decision of the then team principal, Andrea Seidel. So, it's Andrea Stella, Andreas Seidel. But, Seidel was the former top guy. He was the big Piastri fan, also potentially because Seidel had a pretty close working relationship for some time with Mark Webber. So there's reason to believe that it's understandable that Andrea Seidel, big fan of Piastri, wanted to bring him in. That's what they did. Now, I also think Andrea Stella, the current top boss, is also a big fan of Piastri. He's spoken very, very highly of him indeed. And, I don't believe that the decisions that Andrea Stella has made are in favour of one driver over the other, and potentially even the team in general. But I think it is pretty undeniable that Zak Brown has a favourite. Now, whether that matters or not, whether that's actually had any indication or any impact, let's say, on what's happened in the season so far, the answer is quite possibly has. And, intrigue to your thoughts, because Zak Brown is not the team principal, but in many instances, he kind of acts like it, right? Like, often when you'll see, formerly Christian Horner, but Toto Wolff and all the other team principals, James Vowles, etc., when they're talking with press, they're talking with media, or they're doing things as team principals, often Zak Brown will just be there instead of Andrea Stella. And it's like, well, why? You're the CEO, right? You're not the team principal, but it feels sometimes like they kind of share that role, certainly from the public perspective. So this is definitely relevant, and there's other reasons and evidences, let's say, to back this up as well. So Palou said, Zak told me Piastri's performance would be evaluated against mine for 2024. Zak said that from his point of view, my chance of getting the F1 seat was not affected by Oscar. But everything had changed. I know everything had changed from that point on. I started to be more willing to listen and or to basically stay with Chip Ganassi. So Brown then came out and said that I'd not misled him. I told him what the opportunities would be. I never told him that he would be under consideration, even though Palou believes believes that was implied. And you might look at this and some of the reactions and say, well, okay, Palou's just not very happy. And look, basically, McLaren are suing him for $20 million, right? That's what's happening here, because Palou, in their opinion, reneged on a contract that they had agreed on. But actually, for a few reasons, it's a bit more complicated than that when we get to this business practices part of this. Even if you think what McLaren have done here is a bit sketchy, what you'll see in a second is even a bit more so, potentially. So there was further talk about him being upset and angry when McLaren had signed another rookie driver instead. There was then the AlphaTauri discussion, and McLaren at the time were not very happy about this, of course. Now things got a little even further spicier, because there was then this. So Palou said that he signed that contract based on lies and false impressions. And, I mean, he even alleges, this is one of the interesting things, I found out that my lawyers knew about that clause. There was a blackout date in his contract with Chip Ganassi Racing. They knew about the clause, but Mr. Brown was paying my lawyers. So he alleges that Zak Brown knew that the contract he was signing wasn't going to be valid. And, if that's true, then it feels like Palou most definitely has a case. The other interesting thing is this. So there have been a few screenshots going around, seemingly screenshots that have been printed out and presented in court. For example, there's some documentation here, password for which was Palou, and then Zak Brown allegedly says here in this chat, August 3rd, 2023, keep everything WhatsApp and then delete. I'll respond any changes here. There was then this other series of messages that implies, I believe this is between like a journalist and someone on the inside, but they were on the inside and they said that they just turned off McLaren's mandated 7-day disappearing messages. And this guy was like, damn, they really do that? And he says, yeah, we do that to cover our ass in lawsuits, talk about a red flag. So again, very questionable business practices, and this is being discussed in court at the moment. But I think what's really relevant for us in Formula 1 is, okay, maybe Zak Brown is a bit of a sleazy salesman, but also, what does that mean for Lando Norris and Oscar Piastri, right? Because there's a general feeling for many that Lando has certainly had the run of the green when it comes to these decisions made by McLaren. Is that, luck? Is that by design? Would be an understandable question, especially when it's felt like that Norris has been, and look, he's been with McLaren for a long time. He is going to be, to some extent, the golden boy of that team. But I think it's also pretty clear that if you had to ask Zak Brown under oath in court who's his favourite driver on his team, there is probably only one answer. The other reason for that is that he did resign from this appointment actually earlier this year, not long ago. I think it was when they did a sale to Veloce Media, yeah. But so basically Zak Brown was a director and CEO of Lando's company Quadrant, and I don't know if he still has ownership in Quadrant. It's quite possible that he does, but he was for a time top guy. So, him and Lando are very good friends and they are business partners, right? Now, he's no longer a director of Quadrant. As I say, he may well still have ownership. I'm not totally sure. This is also not like brand new information, right? Like, this has been publicly known for some time, but it's still interesting because it's all happening now and people are like, right, there's even more of an interlinking between Zak Brown and Lando Norris than maybe some people thought. So, they are more than just, let's say, a boss-driver relationship. There's much more going on there. And look, if it's just Zak and he was totally separate from what happens on the track and with the team, then this might be fine. But as we know, Zak is a big part of the team, right? Like, he's there all the time. He's always doing the interviews and with the media, and he's as much of a public face of McLaren leadership as Andrea Stella is. So, understandably, people are looking at all this and saying, well, hang on a second here. Does this heavily indicate that there is some internal McLaren bias in terms of what they want to do? Now, look, I still think Oscar Piastri is going to head up and win this championship. And with all of these things happening, I can totally understand why many fans want exactly that to happen, right? Because then it would kind of be counter, in some people's estimation, to what McLaren have been trying to make happen this season. And I think that with all this happening, let's say Hamilton's words, they do ring true when he told Oscar earlier, before the Singapore Grand Prix, don't give up any more positions, Like, if the team orders come through, do what you want to do what you need to do for your championship goals, the constructors is now secured, right? So, and I think Oscar would be wise to take that advice. Even this, talking about damage control, this Oscar fan on Twitter said, McLaren's going to make Oscar and Zak turn up in the same car, aren't they? And, well, guess who helps out of the car together when they turn up to the MTC to do their celebration? Yep, it's Zak and Oscar in the same car. So it's all very predictable. And I don't know if anyone's really buying it, but intrigued to your thoughts on all this stuff in the comment section below. Hit the like button if you enjoyed, subscribe if you're new, take care, and I'll see you next time.